The combination of magic potion and fruit, when mystery descended upon the sea, the world began to change, faith sprouted, the flames of revolution began to boil, pirates obeyed in fear, the navy could no longer rule the sea, and the Tianlong people only trembled. Chapter 1. Blasphemous Cards. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Somewhere in the East China Sea. On the calm sea surface, a sudden wave surged and the seawater was dyed bright red. A sea beast, resembling a snake but with a cat's head, rushed out of the sea. Its body was covered in scales and it looked up in the sky with a roar. It then fell, and blood flowed out of its mouth, nose, and wounds, staining a larger area of seawater red. A young man holding a trident with light blue curly hair, who appeared to be only 17 or 18 years old, emerged from the sea and quickly swam to the side of this sea king. With one hand, he grabbed the huge fins of the sea king and quickly swam towards the shore. Along the coast, there are about 10 young people busy building a ship. The ship is not big, less than 10 meters in length, about 7 or 8 meters in length. It is a relatively traditional wind sailing ship. When they saw the young man dragging the Sea King class clothes, these people stopped their work and looked towards the coast. Luo Yen. Are you back? A person couldn't help but shout, and the young man had already landed on the ground, smiling at the person. Uncle Pool, I got a big guy today. You guys should split it up first. I only need a small piece. You actually killed a sea beast. At first, these people's attention was still on Luo Yen, but now they have noticed the sea beast that was dragged ashore. Although this sea beast is not particularly large among the sea beasts, and even relatively small in size, with a length of less than 10 meters, most fishing boats have to flee when encountering it. But now it has been killed by a young man from Luo Yen, and it was still fought in the sea. Luo smiled and nodded, lifting his arm holding the trident. There was a scar almost 2 fingers wide on it. Although it was not a serious injury, it was definitely not something that could be left unattended. I was slightly injured. I have already dealt with this sea beast a bit. Just take it with you. By the way, how long will it take for my ship to be built? As he spoke, Luo Yen turned his gaze to the wind sailboat that seemed to have been almost built. A mustache was tied into a fried dough twists braid. It looked like he was in his 50s. The middle-aged man with bronze skin patted his chest, his head slightly raised, and he replied proudly. It will be completed in no more than 3 days, Xiaoluyan. Are you really going to see? Yeah, the world is so big, I want to go see it. Everyone, I've been working hard for you all these days. I'm a bit tired, so I'll go back first. Luo Yen waved his hand at the crowd and turned his head to leave. The shipbuilders were also polite and immediately put down their work and ran over to decompose the huge sea beast. Although there are more than 10 people to share, each person can still get enough meat for their family to eat for half a month, but they will only leave a day or 2 of it, and the rest will be sold. Luo Yan's home is a small wooden house with no furniture in it. The living room only has 1 table and 2 chairs, which looks very empty, but it is cleaned very clean. As soon as he entered the room, Luo Yen took out a large kettle of water from the shadow in the corner, poured it into his mouth twice, and the wound on his arm healed at a visible speed. After finishing this, he took out a large iron box and placed it on the table. The iron box was opened, and inside was a pile of seemingly scattered and unreachable things, including flowers and plants of various colors, bird feathers, animal eyeballs and organs, as well as some things that condensed into a jelly-like mass. Everything was separated by the grid inside the iron box, preventing contact with each other, and everything was wrapped in a thin film. Looking at these collections, Luo Yen couldn't help but nod and took out a fist-sized dark blue crystal from his pocket and put it into the empty compartment of the iron box. After finishing this, he spread out his palm and in an instant, a light appeared, and tarot cards floated out of his palm. These tarot cards were illusory and transparent, flipping rapidly. Soon, one of them left the team and flew to the front of Luo Yen, becoming solid. On the front of this tarot card is a figure standing on the waves, dressed in lightning, looking down at the man below in the gloomy sky. Below the man lies countless trembling figures. The man's face was as sharp as a knife, his muscles were clearly defined, and just a glance gave a feeling of wanting to kneel down, with a small column of characters next to him reading, Sequence 0 Tyrant. Luo Yan rubbed his finger on the face of the card, and it flipped like a book, quickly stopping at the position he needed. The card was labeled Sequence 6 Wind Dependent. Only 100 milliliters of mermaid or mermaid's blood is missing. Only those who have become wind-dependent can be considered to have preliminary self-protection ability. Luo Yan murmured in a low voice, and soon a bitter smile appeared. He was originally an ordinary college student on Earth. After reading the book, The Lord of Secrets, he felt a surge of excitement and developed a strong interest in tarot cards. So he placed an order online, but as soon as he received it, he fainted in both eyes. When he woke up again, he was already in this room. After repeatedly confirming through newspapers and a series of other things, he found himself crossing into the world of the One Piece King. At that time, he was confused and desperate. As a High-Mi, he knew very well how dangerous this world was. With his thin arms and legs, he would have to die if he encountered a pirate robbery. Fortunately, we also traveled together with the tarot card, or rather not the same, because there were only 20.2 main cards, and they had changed their appearance into something similar to the Blasphemy card in The Lord of Secrets. Each card recorded a complete path to the gods, but it was not Russell's image. Moreover, the Blasphemy card seems to have been localized, with many ingredients and rituals that are different from the original, and there are many substitutes, and even many material descriptions are ambiguous. For example, one of the main ingredients of the Wind Warrior is the brain crystal of a small sea beast. It should be noted that there are many types of sea beasts, but the formula does not clearly state which type of sea beast it is. At that time, Luo Yan almost did not hesitate to choose the path of the tyrant. As one of the 5 paths of omniscience and omnipotence, representing the omnipotent path of sea, land, and air, it was definitely the most advantageous in this world of great navigation. Moreover, if there was a way back, the omniscient and omnipotent would undoubtedly have the most hope of obtaining it and putting the method into action. Most of the potion materials used by the tyrant in the early stages were related to the ocean, and they are also the best collected in such a world. For example, in the beginning, Luo Yan only collected all the materials for the Serial 9 Sailor potion in the vegetable market, and even didn't need to spend money because they were all worthless things. The main material is the swim bladder of a deep-sea fish, the crystal of a red octopus's brain, and the auxiliary material is 100 g of scales from a large fish, 80 milliliters of blood from a black octopus, 100 milliliters of pure water, and 1 yellow sunflower. Chapter 2. Going to Sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fish swim bladder is something that can be sold in the market. Although it is slightly more expensive than fish, it is not much more expensive. If you only need 1 or 2, you can get it directly with a sweeter mouth. As for scales and octopus blood, they are all waste materials in the market that need to be cleaned up every day. They are picked for free and can be found on the roadside of sunflowers. The only thing that made Luo Yan put in some effort was the crystallization of the red octopus's brain. For this, he squatted next to the seafood stall for several days, watching the boss kill dozens of red octopuses, but didn't see any brain crystallization. Finally, the boss took the initiative to ask, and Luo Yan said that he wanted to learn how to kill fish, so he came to watch every day. Fortunately, the boss was a passionate person and took the initiative to let Luo Yan practice. Then, Luo Yan personally slaughtered a red octopus that had been caught for a while but was already on the brink of death, and finally obtained the crystal. At this point, he realized that some special materials had to be obtained by him personally. After taking the potion, he did not hear any inappropriate sounds like in the original work. Even if he had just taken the potion, he did not have a tendency to go crazy. Later on, he analyzed that perhaps it was because the lower levels of this world were not as chaotic and crazy as in the Lord of Secrets, and there was no initial will, no influence from high-ranking individuals, no gaze from external gods. It was a very orderly world, so the risk of taking potions was very low. In addition, the magic potion does not leave behind the spirit of the decks, and it is also very easy to digest. However, because of this, most ritual magic cannot be used. Of course, Luo Yan himself does not know any ritual magic. After becoming a sailor, Mo Yan began to digest potions while collecting potion materials from the furious people in Sequence 8. In order to collect materials, he often rowed a raft into the sea and brought a specially made trident up the mountain to hunt, and the harvest was very good. And he couldn't handle so much harvest alone, so he decided to share some of the harvest with his neighbors and ask them to help sell the other part. He gained a strong friendship with his neighbors in a few ways, and now those who helped him build ships are those who have benefited. He is in such a hurry to go out to sea not because he needs to digest Sequence 7, the navigator's magic potion, but mainly to collect subsequent materials. On this small island in the East China Sea, the extraordinary materials of Sequence 6 are almost at their limit, and subsequent materials must be found by going out to sea. The navigator's magic potion has actually been almost digested. Luo Yan chose to go out to sea during this time period because he calculated the time. Luffy has already gone out to sea, and he has no intention of getting on the spaceship. However, this does not prevent him from pulling Luffy's wool. And he knows what kind of person Luffy is. As long as he provides some help or expresses some goodwill to Luffy at the appropriate time, the other party will definitely lend a helping hand when he encounters trouble in the future. There is nothing more valuable than investing in the protagonist. As soon as the ship is built, it will set sail. Luo Yan covered the box, carefully put it away, and made a low resolution. As the sky gradually darkened, a full moon hung high in the sky, and the lights of the surrounding houses went out one by one. Luo Yan was no exception, but he did not rest. Instead, he took out a metal box the size of a palm from under the bed. Inside the box was a ring with a black background and red stripes, painted with a bat pattern. He put the ring on the middle finger of his right hand, creating a black aura that formed a pair of black bat wings behind him. His originally pale golden eyes were also dyed orange with red. In Luo Yan's line of sight, the room at night is no different from that during the day. It's not that the lights are on, but that he has night vision ability. As an extraordinary tyrant who can dive deep, he already has excellent night vision ability, let alone wearing this ring now. In the process of collecting materials for the past 6 months, Luo Yan has not only gained extraordinary materials and characteristics from the tyrant's path, but mostly obtained them from other channels. This ring corresponds to the vampire in the Moon Path Sequence 7. After gathering the main materials of a magic potion, Luo Yan usually categorizes them together to avoid confusion, so some materials will automatically combine with the surrounding things to become magical items. Although he is not a craftsman and cannot create magical items according to his own wishes, fortunately, there is not much chaos and madness in this world. Even naturally formed magical items do not have significant side effects. At least so far, Luo Yan has not created any magical items that he cannot bear negative effects on. The ability of this ring is to give the wearer night vision ability, attack with corrosive effects, significantly increase the owner's speed, possess flying ability, and the ability to communicate with animals and briefly tame them. The negative effect is that wearing it will crave blood. And if worn in bright sunlight, the wearer will weaken after 10 minutes. Luo Yan flew out of the window silently, flapping his wings and flying towards the deep mountains. Soon, he arrived at the entrance of a cave. This cave is very deep, and even with night vision ability, Luo Yan cannot see it all at a glance. This is also why he wears a vampire ring. Without flying ability, even if he is agile, he cannot enter here, and this is his treasure trove. In order to prevent thieves from entering the house when he goes out, Luo Yen hides the vast majority of extraordinary materials and magical items that are not usually used in this hole. He needs to change the containers every 5 days and reinforce the spiritual wall used to isolate those materials with spiritual reinforcement. Today is not the day to reinforce the spiritual wall, but there are still 3 days left before going out to sea, and Luo Yen has no plans to go out during these 3 days, so he plans to retrieve his things in advance. After more than 10 minutes of busyness, Luo Yen quietly returned to the room carrying 3 silver-white suitcases, similar to those specifically designed for holding money. As soon as he entered the room, he couldn't wait to take off the ring, carefully wrapped it spiritually and put it in the iron box, finally letting out a long sigh of relief. This thing is really not useful. Indeed, one still needs to become a wind dependent to have stable flying ability, and one must become a wind dependent as soon as possible. Luo Yen did not intend to become a pirate when going out to sea. The higher the sequence, the more difficult it is to obtain the required materials. Once he becomes a pirate, some materials will become very difficult to obtain. Therefore, he hopes to operate at sea as an adventurer and find opportunities to join the Revolutionary Army. He believed that the Revolutionary Army would be very interested in magic potions, and as long as both sides reached a cooperation, they could use the resources of the Revolutionary Army to collect materials for themselves. As for the Navy, he never thought about it from the beginning, and even preferred to become a pirate rather than join the Navy, because once he joined the Navy, it meant being bound by regulations and unable to move freely, which would greatly affect the collection of materials. Moreover, once the secret of the magic potion was discovered by the Navy, he believed that he would definitely receive special care, and it was uncertain whether there would be personal freedom at that time. Chapter 3. Divination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is also why Luo Yen hopes to become a wind dependent as soon as possible. Becoming a wind dependent is not about improving his combat power. Low to medium order magic potions actually have no advantage in this world, let alone facing those with demon fruit abilities. Even if facing people who have not eaten demon fruits, it is not a guaranteed victory. What he longs for is the ability of the wind companion to control the wind and fly, and he can now move in the sea for nearly an hour without any equipment. Once you become a wind dependent, you can fly and spend more than an hour underwater. This way, even if you can't fight in the East China Sea and the first half of the Great Route, it's very easy to escape, and almost no one can stop you. 3 days later, Luo Yen set sail from the island with the farewell of his neighbors and friends, heading west all the way. This ship is not big, only about 10 meters from beginning to end, divided into 2 levels, and can accommodate 6 or 7 people. It's not that he doesn't want to build a bigger ship. In fact, someone took the initiative to ask if the ship was too small and could be rebuilt to be bigger during construction, but Luo Yen refused. The reason was simple. No matter how big the ship was, he couldn't control it. As a Sequence 7 navigator, he can use water magic to influence the water flow to a certain extent, and can easily control a ship, but there are also limits. Although this ship is not his limit yet, there is always some room for himself. His idea is very simple. Since this ship can accommodate 6 or 7 people, he would wait for himself to recruit 6 crew members before switching to a larger ship. He never thought of using this ship all the time. The ship drifted at sea for half a month without a clear destination, just heading west. Luo Yen sat cross-legged next to the beach chair on the front deck, facing a fist-sized planet with a base adorned with various gemstones and broken diamonds. He closed his eyes tightly, muttered words in his mouth, and his hands kept caressing the surface of the planet. The people who are suitable to become my crew, the people who are suitable to become my crew, the people who are suitable to become my crew. After reciting it 7 times, the surface light of Jean Planet flashed by. Luo Yen opened his eyes, slowly exhaled, and then stopped caring about Jean Planet. He stood up and lay down on a recliner, his face slightly haggard. I need a true astrologer. Before that, I also need a boatman, a chef, a helmsman. Luo Yan murmured to himself in a low and inaudible voice. At first, he wanted to let nature take its course and didn't have much desire for the crew. He thought it was all due to fate. If he met him, he would meet him, and if he didn't, he wouldn't be in a hurry. Now he should focus his main energy on getting the fish man's blood, but after only 3 days at sea, he changed his mind. The difficulty of a person controlling a ship far exceeds his imagination. It's not that it requires such tedious steps, but rather that it's too tiring. With only sequence 7, he doesn't have as much spirituality to constantly control the water flow and accelerate the ship. Then there was the food. He took a lot of food with him on the voyage, but it was all some durable items, such as pickled meat, smoked meat, sausages, and so on. He also brought a lot of rice and flour, but due to culinary limitations, these things were not delicious. So on the 7th day, he couldn't bear it anymore and started actively searching for the crew. Finding the crew on the vast sea was not an easy task, and the only way he could think of was through divination. He used divination to confirm a rough direction and then followed the direction to find it. However, the tyrant path is not good at divination. The prominent feature of this path is the word mang, which means he does not know how to do such things. Fortunately, Luo Yan was already prepared. He has a magical item in his hand that corresponds to the gate path, the extraordinary evolution of the 7th astrologer's characteristics, which can do more accurate divination. However, after so many days, he still has not divined where the person who can become his own crew is. Luo Yan closed his eyes and began to outline Ultraman's meditation to restore his spirituality in his mind. It wasn't until the scorching sun had passed and the sun was westward that he stood up and rubbed the planet again. He planned to do divination a few more times before eating. After all, he had just rested and his spirituality was still abundant. Eating afterwards was also a form of rest, and his spirituality didn't need to be wasted, mainly because he really longed for the crew. Luo Yan did not have much hope for this divination because the process in the previous few days was the same, but there has been no harvest so far. However, just as he finished reciting the spell for the 7th time, a picture came to mind. That is a ship sailing in the darkness, a naval warship, but the picture is very blurry, as if someone has intentionally blurred it, only able to distinguish it as a warship and nothing else can be seen. Got it. Luo Yan suddenly opened his eyes, revealing an indescribable joy on his face, but this joy quickly subsided and even gradually furrowed his brow. Warship, TSK. How could it be a warship? Luo Yan was caught in a dilemma. Even if the other party was a pirate, or even a well-known pirate, he dared to directly rob people. After all, active pirates in the East China Sea are basically not strong, and Fishman Along is already the ceiling. However, he really didn't want to rob warships. It's not that he's afraid he won't be able to defeat the Navy. Since the active pirates in the East China Sea are not strong, it means that the Navy sent here will not be strong either. However, he doesn't want to go out to sea as a pirate. At least he doesn't want to get a bounty order before becoming a serial 4. If he steals a Navy ship here, getting a bounty order will be a certainty. Hiss. This Nima is too naughty. Luo Yan took a deep breath, still undecided. Offending the Navy was something he didn't want, but giving up like this was also something he didn't want. After pondering for a long time, he refocused his gaze on the occupied planet, with a slightly upturned corner of his mouth. Since he couldn't make up his mind, he decided to do divination first. The sun gradually set on the sea level, and a warship rode up and down in the waves. A naval colonel wearing a hood decorated with 2 small ears and 6 long beards stood at the bow of the ship, gazing at the sea at night. Behind him, several sailors were busy tidying up the deck. Generally speaking, such a warship will be equipped with a relatively large number of sailors, not only because piloting the ship requires a lot of people, but also considering that once encountering an enemy, there should be enough troops to fight. But this time Colonel Mouse only brought people who happened to be able to pilot this ship. Firstly, this sea area is relatively safe for him, and secondly, because he has other business dealings this time, it is not easy to bring too many people. Hee hee. If everything goes smoothly, we can get a lot of Bailey on this trip. Chapter 4. Slaves. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. As soon as he thought he was about to receive a large sum of money, Colonel Mouse couldn't help but smile on his face, and his heart was already calculating where to go to have fun after returning. However, at this moment, the waves suddenly grew larger, and the whole ship was shaking violently. Colonel Mouse stumbled and used his hand to support the guardrail to stabilize his body. "Colonel, the waves are getting bigger. Do you want those guys at the bottom of the cabin to come out and breathe? If they die." A sailor rushed over to report, and Colonel Mouse's face immediately darkened. "It's just a little wave. How could it be so easy to get into trouble? Wait for 10 minutes, and if the waves don't calm down in 10 minutes, let them out." "Colonel, look at what's in the sky." Before Colonel Mouse could finish his command, the sailor looked at the sky with a frightened expression, his tone urgent and mixed with a hint of fear. Colonel Mouse was stunned for a moment, then instinctively looked up and saw a man with dark blue hair and a pair of bat wings on his back flying straight towards the warship. "Enemy attack. Quick. Pull the alarm." Colonel Mouse shouted in a panic, and the sound of an alarm immediately spread throughout the entire warship. The sailors who were originally preparing to rest rushed out of the cabin, and the next few did not even have time to wear clothes. However, everyone was armed, and it was obvious that they had received training in this area and knew what to do first in case of emergencies. Faced with the gun barrel pointing at him, Luo Yen did not flinch at all and landed heavily on the deck. Before these sailors could react, Luo Yen quickly threw all their weapons away at the speed of dragging out the remnants. "Damn it! You, who the hell are you?" Colonel Mouse instinctively drew his gun, but before he could even aim his gun at the intruder, a cold and sharp short blade had already been placed on his neck. The faint piercing pain made him realize that as long as he dared to make any movement, he would die. "You have something to say, what do you want?" As a naval colonel who can collude with pirates, he knows very well when to admit guilt, and now is the time to admit guilt. Luo Yan's mouth curved as he glanced at the sea soldier who had not fully reacted before finally turning his gaze to Colonel Mouse. "Colonel Mouse. It seems that there are not just a few people on your ship. Call everyone out." At first glance, Luo Yan seemed casual, but in fact, he was confirming who could become his crew member. However, there was no such person among these sailors, and his divination results pointed to this ship, which means that there were still people who were not present. Colonel Mouse's body trembled slightly, struggling as he flashed past his face, then turned to the nearest sailor. "Hurry up, go ahead and bring everyone out." In the face of life and death, he did not hesitate at all. Although he did not know how the other party knew that there were slaves on his ship, nor did he know what the other party wanted to do, he knew that he was not qualified to bargain now. After receiving the order, the sailor didn't dare to slack off and quickly ran into the cabin. The corners of Luo Yan's mouth became more prominent, and his gaze swept left and right twice before retracting the short blade into the scabbard around his waist. "I'm a bit tired, get me a chair." Luo Yan casually instructed a sea soldier, who dared not hesitate at all and immediately ran to bring a chair over. Although Luo Yan had put away his weapons, no one on the ship dared to resist, including Colonel Mouse, who was led by them. With just a few shots, they knew that everyone on their side was not a match for the other, and they had not forgotten that the person in front of them had flown by, which meant that the other could fly away at any time. "It doesn't seem like we've completely torn apart yet, at least the other party hasn't hurt anyone so far, and if we take the initiative, the consequences will be unpredictable. May I ask how you address me?" Colonel Mouse approached with a hint of hospitality to inquire, either by using a friendly attitude to reduce the other party's malice towards his side, or by obtaining intelligence to seek revenge in the future. Luo Yen glanced at Colonel Mouse with a sidelong glance and did not answer. Of course, he could not have said his name, otherwise he wouldn't have had to disguise himself. He still hasn't put away his bat wings and used magic to turn his hair into a dark blue and almost black color. He just doesn't want to be wanted by the Navy so soon, which is why he didn't harm the sailors despite his strong appearance. Where are you planning to go? Luo Yen asked back, and Colonel Mouse's smile froze for a moment before returning to normal. The next stop is Kokoja Island, and our warship is patrolling. Oh, Coco Island. Luo Yen let out a long sound, with no significant ups and downs on the surface. He was very happy that Colonel Mouse dared to go there, which meant that Ah Long had not yet fallen, and Luffy had not come here yet. Luffy had already set sail, which meant that Luffy would not be here long ago. As long as he was waiting for a rabbit on Coco Island, he could squat down to Luffy, and it wouldn't be long. Not long after, the sailor who was ordered to bring people returned to the splint, holding a rope in his hand and tying 3 people behind him. 2 men and 1 woman, one of whom has a well-proportioned figure and no distinctive features, while the other has a muscular physique and is nearly 2 meters tall, making him a solid, big guy. The woman is a white-haired girl who looks less than 20 years old, with a slightly slender body, and even walks a bit stumbling, looking somewhat sickly. Hey! What kind of people are they? They don't look like Navy or prisoners. Luo Yen asked Colonel Mouse in a very casual tone, and Colonel Mouse's face became slightly twisted. After hesitating for a moment, he finally gritted his teeth and opened his mouth. They are slaves, slaves. Slaves. Ha. You, a naval colonel, also work part-time as a slave trader. Luo Yen didn't hide his mockery. Colonel Mouse opened his mouth as if he wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't say anything. Luo Yen suddenly gave a mysterious smile, flipped his palm, and magically pulled out a very gorgeous-looking crystal ball from his arms. Hey! I have something nice here, let me show you. Luo Yen suddenly wore a friendly smile on his face, and Colonel Mouse's gaze instinctively fell on the crystal ball. The crystal ball's light flashed and the scene appeared. The scene starts with the sailor pulling out 3 slaves from the cabin just now, and continues until Luo Yen asks who those 3 people are and Colonel Mouse answers that they are slaves. Chapter 5. Solicitation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Colonel Mouse's face instantly turned pale upon seeing this scene, and his body seemed to have lost all its strength, falling to the ground. Once the image on the crystal ball was transmitted to the Navy branch, he would not only lose his military rank, but also be imprisoned or even executed on the spot. You. Colonel Mouse was excitedly speechless, and Luo Yen put away the crystal ball with a smile on his face. Don't worry, I don't have any malice towards you. You can tell from me that I haven't harmed any of you since then, so rest assured that I won't hand over the footage to the Navy for now, and I will also help you cover it up, such as handling the evidence for you. As he spoke, he reached out and pointed to the 3 slaves. Colonel Mouse twitched his lips twice, but without any hesitation, he nodded. Then, I'll trouble you. You're welcome. Oh, by the way, you said your next stop is Coco Island, right? It sounds like that island is rich in oranges, and I'm going to buy some. I'll bring the boat over later, and you're responsible for leading the way ahead. Ah. Okay. Colonel Mouse nodded busily, and at that moment his mood improved a lot. Luo Yen stood up and waved at the 3 slaves from afar. Wait a moment, I'll set sail to pick you up. After speaking, he spread his wings and flew into the sky, his figure quickly disappearing into the night. At this moment, a sailor cautiously approached Colonel Mouse and lowered his voice. Colonel, he's also going to Coco Island. We can work together with Aaron to give him. The sailor didn't finish speaking, but made a motion of wiping his neck with his hand. Colonel Mouse's face, which had just regained a little blood color, immediately twisted and he kicked the sailor down. "Are you an idiot? Didn't you see that he can fly? No matter how strong Allocation is, can he fly? We tore our faces, he just needs to hand over that crystal ball to the branch, and we're all doomed." Not long after, a small boat sailed from a distance. It was the boat set sail by Luo Yan, and Colonel Mouse and his group did not hesitate or struggle at all. They personally sent the 3 slaves to Luo Yan's boat with great care. That's great, then let's lead the way to Coco Island." Luo Yan gave a simple command, and Colonel Mouse nodded and bowed before returning to the warship and heading towards Kokoja Island. Luo Yan controlled the water flow, causing the small boat to fall behind the warship and follow them to Kokoja Island. After adjusting the boat, he turned his gaze to the 3 of them. The 3 of them did not know Luo Yan. Although he rescued them from the navy, they all showed some fear before they were clear about his purpose. Luo Yan worked hard to show kindness, personally untied the 3 of them, and then revoked his illusion, revealing his original appearance. He immediately opened a palm-sized box, and a light yellow light immediately spread out. Inside the box was an egg-sized eyeball with vertical pupils. In the moment when the light enveloped them, the 3 of them felt uneasy and calmed down inexplicably. This is also a magical item, corresponding to a hypnotist, but its main function is not to hypnotize others. In addition to having a certain calming effect on others' emotions, its main function is to allow all intelligent beings within the radiance to communicate with each other's hearts, and can intuitively feel whether each other has malicious intent and whether their words come from the heart. Ahem. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Luo Yan and I am an adventurer. I am currently raising friends. If you are willing to follow me, we will become friends in the future. If you are not willing to follow me, you can leave on your own after arriving at Kokoja Island. I can give you some money as travel expenses or future living expenses. Of course, this won't be too much, after all, I am not wealthy either. The 3 of them were already desperate, and in their view, the best fate in the future was to meet a well-tempered master to prevent themselves from being abused to death. Now they seem to have been saved, by the person in front of them who looks younger than all of them, and what this young person says is so sincere, without any impurities. The 3 of them looked at each other without reservation, but for a moment no one spoke. Luo Yan urged them and waited quietly. After a long time, the burly man spoke first and said, "You really would consider us companions?" "Of course, didn't I just say that?" The smile on Luo Yan's face became stronger. He always wanted crew members now. If all 3 of them chose to leave because of what he had just said, it would be ruined. Now at least one person seems willing to follow him, and if nothing else, just charge towards this block, which gives him a sense of security. After listening, the other 2 looked at each other. The white-haired girl seemed to be moved, but only opened her mouth and didn't speak, as if there were any concerns. When Luo Yan answered the big guy, his attention was also focused on the other 2 people. Although the white-haired girl's movements were very small, he was still caught. Seeing this, he immediately turned his gaze to the white-haired girl. "Miss, do you have anything to say?" The white-haired girl's body trembled suddenly, as if startled by Luo Yan's name, and then she became somewhat timid. You also have requirements when it comes to accepting crew members, right? I haven't been in good health since I was young, and I don't have many strengths. Of course, I also have certain standards for accepting crew members, but since my divination results tell me that you are suitable to be my crew members, I believe that you all have your own strengths. Since you have brought up this topic, why don't you talk about what you know or what you used to do? Seeing that Luo Yan did not change his mind due to his words, the white-haired girl's eyes lit up, but soon dimmed again. I used to work as a caregiver in a hospital, and my usual job was to help people bandage wounds and replace hanging bottles, which were very basic things that anyone could do. The white-haired girl's voice became quieter as she spoke, and her head unconsciously lowered. In her opinion, her previous job was a job that anyone on the street could do, without any characteristics or skills. However, as Luo Yan listened, his eyes became even brighter, making him the best ship doctor candidate in his mind. When others choose a ship doctor, they must choose a serious doctor, but he has too many choices. After all, he has magic potions, and no matter who drinks the pharmacist's magic potion, he can become a top doctor. So there is a saying about that person's former profession. Chapter 6. Allocation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The most suitable profession for doctors is undoubtedly nursing. As long as a nurse drinks the pharmacist's magic potion, she will become a good doctor who can take care of people. Okay. From now on, you will become a ship doctor. Luo Yan fiercely closed his palm and made a loud pop sound, announcing the status of the white-haired girl. The white-haired girl was stunned on the spot and even couldn't react for a moment. But I don't understand medicine at all, this. Don't worry, I will make you the best doctor in the world. Luo Yan patted his chest and made a promise, then looked at the big guy. What about you? What did you do before? The big guy saw that Luo Yan's criteria for selecting crew members were so lenient, and immediately gained confidence, raising his head slightly. I used to be a farmer, specializing in growing wheat and fruit trees. Besides farming, what else would you do? No, I can farm. Captain, what position do you think I am suitable for? The big guy didn't notice the change in Luo Yan's expression and still appeared confident. Luo Yan twitched his lips and turned his gaze to the seemingly ordinary young man. What did you do before? The young man, although not insecure, did not have the confidence of a big guy, and immediately stood straight when asked. I used to be a bartender, yes. I served tea and water. Pour tea and water. Can you cook? When Luo Yan asked this question, the young man's expression suddenly froze and his gaze became somewhat evasive. I'm responsible for guarding the bar, cooking and so on is the responsibility of the kitchen staff. Can you sing? Luo Yan was not disappointed because the other party didn't know how to cook. He continued to ask questions, and the young man's face changed slightly. His mouth kept opening and closing several times, seeming to be hesitating before finally making up his mind. I remember the lyrics of many songs, but if you want to rap. Captain. I can cook. At this moment, the big guy suddenly interrupted loudly, and Luo Yan frowned, but slowly lowered his head. Okay, then you'll be our chef for now, he said as he looked at the young man again. You are the helmsman. Ah. Why? Captain, I think I'm better suited to be a helmsman. Although the big guy took the initiative to say that he could cook, he hoped he could get the position of helmsman more because he felt he was more suitable. As for being honest about his cooking skills, he didn't know why he suddenly said it, but felt that he shouldn't hide it. Because he sings poorly. Luo Yan explained very seriously, but upon hearing this explanation, the three of them were filled with question marks. Is there any necessary connection between singing poorly and becoming a helmsman? If it were to say that Luo Yan made the white-haired girl a ship doctor, it could barely be explained. After all, nurses and doctors work together at least, even if their relationship is equivalent to the difference between a dishwasher and a chef, they can see it every day at least, and under exposure, they can learn a little. However, singing is unpleasant and helmsmen are completely beyond reach. You guys wait here, I'll come when I go. Without giving anyone else the opportunity to inquire, Luo Yan got up and entered the cabin, directly preparing magic potions in the room. He was going to prepare magic potions for the three of them, including a pharmacist's potion, a sailor's potion, and a hunter's potion. Originally, the big guy should be more suitable for the mother's path. After all, he comes from farming and has some experience in cultivating plants, but he really doesn't want the other party to take this path. After all, He is currently in the period of entrepreneurship, and his mother's pathway in sequence 8 is a physician, which has already been functionally duplicated. In the early stages of such entrepreneurship, he cannot be so extravagant, and when his mother reaches sequence 2, she will become a woman. It seems a bit early to talk about sequence 2 now, but if it really comes to that, Luo Yan really can't think about what it would be like for such a rough man to become a woman. That's why he hesitated. And when the big guy said he could cook, he completely gave up the idea of letting the big guy go through his mother's path. He didn't want to one day eat cows growing from the ground or fish jumping out of melons. After mixing 3 magic potions, Luo Yan put them into a metal bottle and used his spirituality to perform a simple isolation before quickly arriving on the deck. After about 10 minutes, the 3 of them remained very honest on the deck. For them, Luo Yan was the one who saved them, and even if they only met, his words had a certain weight. Here we go, these are potions, 1 bottle per person. Let me introduce them to you first. You can understand potions as something like demon fruits, but taking them won't be disliked by the sea. However, in the early stages, potions were not as powerful as demon fruits. Potions are a system, and they have their own paths. Luo Yan distributed the magic potion to the 3 people while introducing the potion system, risks, and characteristics. Finally, he glanced at everyone. Now that the magic potion has arrived in your hands, whether you want to drink it or not is entirely up to you. At first, the 3 of them were very enthusiastic when they heard the introduction, but when they heard that there was a risk of losing control and becoming monsters after drinking the magic potion, they all hesitated a bit. Captain, you said that this potion was not strong in the early stages and was not as strong as the devil's fruit. Do you mean that it is stronger in the later stages than the devil's fruit? The person asking was the big guy, and the other 2 appeared somewhat humble in front of Luo Yan. However, the big guy spoke more, which is also why Luo Yan gave him the hunter potion. He felt that the big guy had a certain talent for provocation. Without hesitation, Luo Yan nodded. He had not planned to paint pancakes for the crew so early, but since the other party took the initiative to bring up the topic, he naturally wouldn't miss such a good opportunity. Of course. The sequence path of the potion is from 9 to 0. According to my estimation, sequence 4 is equivalent to those pirates who reward billions of dollars, and sequence 3 is equivalent to the strength of those who have the ability to awaken demon fruits. Sequence. Before Luo Yan could finish drawing the cake, the white-haired girl raised her hand slightly. So. What does the devil fruit awakening mean? Demon. Cough cough. You can understand it as the strength of the 7 martial seas under the king. Do you know that even within the 7 martial seas under the king, it must be considered relatively strong? Oh. I got it. The white-haired girl nodded, and the other 2 also showed a sudden expression. Although they didn't know how strong the 7 martial seas under the king were, they knew what the 7 martial seas under the king were. They were the great pirates who ruled over the sea and were recognized by the world government. Alright, you guys decide whether or not to drink first, and we'll talk about it later. Chapter 7. Waiting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Luo Yan didn't continue with the sequence anymore, because in sequence 2, it would be a true mythological creature that could be called he. If we were to say it now, this cake would be drawn a bit too big. The 3 of them simultaneously lowered their heads to look at the magic potion in their hands. The big guy and the young man both showed signs of hesitation, except for the white-haired girl who did not hesitate at all. She looked up and drank the magic potion in one gulp, and the 2 gritted their teeth when they saw it. The 3 of them stumbled in their footsteps, exhibiting different abnormalities depending on the type of potion they took. Concentrate your mind, try to concentrate your energy, and sketch something in your mind that doesn't belong to this world. With Luo Yan's reminder, the 3 of them quickly adjusted, and Luo Yan was able to clearly perceive their spiritual overflow, which meant that all 3 of them survived. Magic potion. It's so magical. I feel like I can swim in the sea like a fish. The young man took the lead in withdrawing from the state of receiving knowledge from the potion, and couldn't help but murmur. Although the other two didn't speak, their expressions showed that their mood at the moment was the same as the young man's. Great. Congratulations on all of you getting through taking the potion. From now on, we are true partners. Let's introduce ourselves. Dalamit. The young man was the first to say his own name, and the white-haired girl's thin lips lifted lightly, saying her own name. Charlotte. The big guy took a small step forward, raised his head slightly, and said arrogantly, Atelier, Rhoda. Luo Yen didn't know why the big guy Luo Ta was so arrogant when he said his name, and he didn't want to know either. He just nodded slightly, and he was quite satisfied with the three newly recruited companions. Very good, my name is Luo Yen. You already know this. Now that you are all extraordinary, let me first tell you the basic extraordinary knowledge and acting techniques. The next noon, Colonel Mouse's warship docked next to Kokosia Island, while Luo Yen docked the ship on the other side of the island, separated from Colonel Mouse's ship across the entire island. Luo Yen carried a large suitcase and got off the ship with Xia Tali to the island, while Luo Tali and Mit stayed on board. His goal this time is the blood of the fish man and the solidified heart of the adult fish man. The blood of the fish man is an auxiliary material for the wind-dependent magic potion, while the solidified heart of the adult fish man is one of the main materials for the ocean singer. But Luo Yen has no intention of challenging Allocation himself. His current strength has almost no chance of winning against Allocation, and even with magical items, he can only do half a pound. Anyway, Luffy will definitely come to deal with Allocation. He just needs to wait on the island, and it's also a good opportunity to have a relationship with Luffy. Luffy is also in the entrepreneurial period now, and goodwill at this time is like a seed. It will grow with Luffy's growth, and there will definitely be rewards in the future. This is also one of the reasons why he took Shatali to the island together. After all, Shatali is now a pharmacist. After all, Luffy and Arong's team are working hard, they will definitely be injured. At this time, if Shatali were to serve as a ship doctor to treat them, it would be a great favor. Another reason is that he plans to take Charlotte around the island while Luffy hasn't arrived yet, to see if there are any plants or animals that can be used to make potions. Another day had passed, and Luo Yen sat on a grassy slope by the sea, gazing out into the distance. Xia Tali was behind him, carefully counting the various flowers and plants lying on the ground, all of which were picked by Xia Tali. It's not that Luo Yen doesn't want to help pick herbs together, but he has no idea which flowers and plants are useful and can only distinguish whether the corresponding flowers and plants have spirituality. However, among the flowers and plants collected by Xia Tali, there are only two plants, one with some spirituality, and the others are very ordinary flowers and plants. Captain, this is your fourth time gazing at the sea today. Shatari counted the flowers and carefully packed them into small bags, muttering as if inquiring. Luo Yen nodded without concealing his smile and said, "Yes, I'm waiting for someone." "Who are you waiting for?" "A big boy wearing a straw hat, sunny, and cheerful." Luo Yen didn't directly mention Lu Fei's name, but instead expressed his image in his own heart. Xia Tali paused slightly as she sorted the flowers and plants, looked up at Luo Yen, tilted her head, and a slightly puzzled expression flashed on her face. She then lowered her head and continued sorting. "I always feel that you came to this island for other purposes besides asking me to collect the necessary herbs and buy oranges." Luo Yan's mouth twitched slightly. He didn't expect that Xia Tali actually believed the words he used to deceive Colonel Mouse. "Whether it's collecting herbs or buying oranges, they are secondary, mainly because I need the blood and heart of mermaids, and the group that rules here is a group of mermaids, the group of Allocation. I heard they are the strongest pirates in the East China Sea." Xia Tali has also heard of Allocation's notorious reputation. If she had heard this name before, she would have trembled, but for some reason, when she saw Luo Yan's confident expression, she felt an inexplicable sense of stability in her heart. Even when talking about Along and about taking the other person's heart, she had no fear at all. Luo Yan nodded in agreement with Shatali's statement and said, "That's right. If I were to fight alone now, there should be a chance to do my best, but the other person is not alone, so I need a helper." After Shatali put the last flower in her bag, she sat down next to Luo Yan and took out bottles and jars from the large suitcase in front of Luo Yan to start mixing the medicine. Luo Yan turned his head to take a look, remained quiet and undisturbed. He did not ask the other party what medication was being prepared. Anyway, he had already prepared the healing medication he needed, and now he was more concerned about when Luffy would go to the island. The reason why Luo Yan is so focused is because the golden merit has arrived, which means that Nami has already arrived. Since Nami has arrived, there is no doubt that Luffy and the others are also approaching. Shatali quickly pulled out a can of light brown potion and leaned towards her mouth, ready to drink it. Suddenly, she sensed something and looked up at the sea. Luo Yan, who had been staring at the sea before her, stood up with a smile on his face. A small boat was drifting from a distance, and although it was difficult to see who was on board due to distance, Luo Yan's spiritual intuition told him that it was the person he was waiting for, which was Luffy. "Finally here, let's go and have a drink at the bar." Chapter 8. Promotion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aren't you going to say hello? Shatali was a bit surprised. In the past few days, besides accompanying her to pick herbs, Luo Yan went to bars the most and drank a lot of alcohol every time. Luo Yan shook his head, and the smile on his face became even stronger. "No need, he and I don't know each other, going to say hello now is meaningless, it will have the opposite effect. Captain, I feel like you're a bit of a prodigy." Luo Yan did not deny it, and even nodded in agreement, saying, "That's right, I'm just practicing how to be a god." After waiting for 2 more days, both Luo Yan and Shatali had a relatively easy time. Luo Yan spent most of her time drinking at the bar, while Shatali spent most of her time mixing potions at the hotel. Her enthusiasm for the potions exceeded Luo Yan's expectations. On that day, there was a noticeable riot on the island of Coco, with a large number of villagers rushing towards the location of the A-Long group with weapons or agricultural tools that could be used as weapons. Luo Yan held a trident and stood on the roof, watching the crowd. He knew that the battle was about to begin and that he needed to take action. "Charlotte, just hide inside and don't run around. I'll come when I go." Luo Yan gave an order, and a large amount of black gas surged out of his back, condensing into a pair of bat wings that soared into the sky. Although it was daytime now, the sunlight was not scorching, and he could still barely use the vampire ring. Boom! Before Luo Yan could arrive at the battle, he heard a loud noise and a large amount of smoke and dust. He didn't rush to take action, but instead hid in the shadow of a building next to the battlefield, using the dark magic of the vampire ring to perfectly conceal himself. He waited for Luffy to come just to pick up the ready-made ones. In the original work, Luffy also defeated Along, so he didn't worry at all. He just waited and saw the right time to pick up the heads. At this point, Luffy had already been thrown into the sea, Sauron was fighting against Koba, and Sanji had jumped into the sea to save people. Sauron's swordsmanship is really good. Do I also need to learn swordsmanship? No, swordsmanship doesn't match my sequence path. The top priority is to learn to be domineering, and I can release everything else. Watching the battle, Luo Yan's thinking diverged and he began to ponder some things that he had and couldn't help but murmur. The battle between Sauron and Xiaoba became increasingly fierce, and Luo Yan noticed a small fish man lying not far from him, which made him stunned for a moment. The recipe only requires the blood of the fish man, isn't it ready-made? Why do I have to wait for Along to die? After seeing that the auxiliary material for the Wind Warrior needed the blood of the fishman, and one of the main materials for the Ocean Singer was the solidified heart of the fishman, Luo Yan first thought of Along. Along the way, he also came to plan for Along. Now he realized that he had fallen into a thinking misconception. Although there were not as many fishmen as humans, there was still a large number, and there was no need to force Along's blood. With a thought, Luo Yan used the dark spell and shackles that come with the vampire ring. The black shadows around him became even darker, transforming into a black chain that extended towards the fallen fisherman, silently pulling him into the shadow. This fisherman is on the brink of death, his breathing is slightly imperceptible, but he is still holding his last breath, making him the ideal target for a knife repair. If he is already dead, Luo Yan can only obtain blood, which is the auxiliary material of the wind dependent. Only the fish man he killed can solidify his heart and obtain extraordinary materials. Hey! Luo Yan let out a low laugh and without hesitation stabbed the trident into the throat of the fish man. The already dying fish man died on the spot without any reaction, with blood gushing out. Luo Yan didn't waste it. He took out a test tube from the hidden bag of his clothes and took the amount he needed. Then, on the spot, he took out other extraordinary materials from the small bag on his waist and randomly found an empty wine jar nearby to mix magic potions. After mixing various materials together, a light blue liquid was formed, which sometimes automatically swirled as if a gentle breeze had blown by. Luo Yan's spiritual intuition told him that this was the magic potion of the wind bearer. Without pouring out any other containers of the magic medicine, Luo Yan looked up and drank it all in one gulp from the wine jar. In that moment, he felt the wind constantly surging from all directions, and his body seemed to be hollow. The wind energy penetrated his body directly, constantly transforming it. This process was not painful, but the wind seemed to blow directly onto his soul, making Luo Yan feel his thoughts were chaotic and drifting. He felt that if he was not careful, his soul would be blown away, and he would lose control and become a monster on the spot. He can only try his best to restrain his mind and resist the wind blowing on his soul. After an unknown amount of time, the wind gradually disappeared, and Luo Yan's thoughts gradually calmed down. The first thing that caught his eye was the fish man corpse lying on the ground. The left chest of the corpse was shining with a little light, which was an extraordinary radiance that could not be concealed by clothes and skin. Without hesitation, Luo Yan immediately opened the fisherman's chest and took out the solidified heart inside and put it into his small bag. Rubber! A shout rang out in the distance, and Luo Yan looked up to see that Lu Fei was engaged in a fierce battle with Along. Along was quite arrogant and looked down on Lu Fei, not avoiding his attacks much. Lu Fei punched Along, causing him to retreat one after another. Luo Yan squinted his eyes and a whirlwind swirled around him without any warning, his body gradually floating. Along seemed to sense danger and forcefully stopped his retreat. He turned his head and dodged Lu Fei's punch, seizing the gap and turning back to see a young man with light blue hair and a trident in hand riding the wind. Surprisingly, there are helpers. Along was a bit shocked. Although he didn't know how strong Luo Yan's combat ability was yet, his ability to fly alone was enough to make him value it. Ha! Who are you? Luffy was equally surprised by the sudden assistance, as he didn't know the person in front of him riding the wind. However, Luo Yan did not answer Lu Fei's question because it was a good opportunity he found and would not delay any further. A furious blow. Luo Yan's right arm muscle, which was holding the trident, showed obvious swelling, and a symbol of lightning appeared in his eyes. Spiritual piercing. Along was holding onto a droplet of water in his hand and was about to throw it at the attacker when his head suddenly hurt. He felt countless steel needles piercing his brain at the same time, and his movements became stiff. Puff. The trident pierced through Along's chest, causing his pupils to contract rapidly, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. With the tremendous force of the trident, he retreated several steps in a row. Before he could even stand firm, a sudden gust of wind suddenly blew around him without warning, with countless tangible blades mixed in, and the target was all along. Chapter 9. After the War. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Long kept screaming until a wind blade slashed open his throat, which was already a fatal wound. If his throat was cut open again, he could no longer hold on and fell straight down, blood gushing out, staining the earth red. Is Long dead? Lu Fei stared blankly at Long, who had lost his voice and collapsed in front of him. He couldn't believe that Long had just died and been killed so easily. In fact, Luo Yan's flash killing of Long was not as easy as it seemed on the surface. At this moment, he was panting slightly, and his expression couldn't help but twist. Ignoring so much, he immediately opened the buttons of his clothes, took off a silver white metal with a sword painted on it, wrapped it spiritually and put it in a small bag. This is a magical item corresponding to the interrogator. In order to hunt Long, Luo Yan used the strongest configuration, not only wearing a vampire ring, interrogator badge, trident, but also another magical item. Corresponding to the arsonist, he can use flame magic, but the unexpected promotion prevented him from using that item. Sorry to disturb your duel, but this fisherman is my hunting target. I don't want him to be killed by you, so I'll just take action. After removing the interrogator badge, Luo Yan's twisted expression was calmed down and a smile appeared on his face. It was only then that Lu Fei fully realized. You're so amazing. I said, you're so amazing. Lu Fei was not angry at all because his head was robbed. Instead, his eyes lit up as he looked at Luo Yan, as if saying, come and be my companion. As expected, before Luo Yan could answer, Luffy invited him, do you want to be my companion? Oh, by the way, I am Luffy, the man who wants to become the One Piece. Luffy spoke as he straightened his back and slightly raised his head, appearing very confident. Luo Yan smiled lightly and shook his head, saying, there's no need for companions. I have my own boat and companions, and I'm an adventurer. I'm not prepared to be a pirate. Luffy tilted his head slightly, appearing somewhat puzzled. The term adventurer was not difficult for him to understand, but it was not so familiar. In today's ocean, the vast majority are pirates and sailors, and at most there are some bounty hunters. Adventurers are not uncommon, and can be described as rare. Adventurers. Yeah, adventurer, Luo Yan nodded and explained, freely sailing on the sea to find lost treasures and experiencing the customs and traditions of different places, don't you think it's a great thing? Freedom. Haha. It's really great. Luffy seemed to have a special emotional attachment to the word freedom, and upon hearing it, a smile immediately appeared on his face without any impurities. Luo Yan's face also showed a smile, but not because of freedom, but because all the goals of this trip were achieved. Not only did he hunt Long, but he also met Lu Fei, realizing his true role as an investment protagonist. Although I cannot be your companion, it does not prevent us from becoming friends. Let me formally introduce myself, my name is Luo Yan. As he spoke, Luo Yan extended his hand to Lu Fei. Lu Fei didn't show any affectation and shook hands with Luo Yan. At this moment, Sauron, who had already been sent to the outside of the Dragon Park, walked in, his footsteps slightly floating, indicating a very serious injury. Luffy. How's it going? Is it over? It turned out that the villagers gathered outside had found that there was no movement inside and wanted to come in to see the situation, but were stopped. In the end, it was Solon who came in to check with his strong body. Upon hearing Sauron's voice, Luffy's already faded smile immediately lit up. It's Sauron, it's over. Long is already dead, but it wasn't me who killed him, it was him. His name is Luo Yan. As Luffy spoke, he extended his finger to Luo Yan, and Sauron immediately looked at him. At this moment, a burst of cheers erupted outside. Although it was Sauron who came in to check the situation, there were several people following behind him. On the one hand, they wanted to take Sauron away at a critical moment, and on the other hand, they also wanted to understand the situation. Now that they heard that Allocation had died, they couldn't help but shout out. The people outside also cheered when they heard the sound. Allocation is dead. Allocation is dead. Great, it's really great. The dark clouds covering our heads have finally dissipated, it's really great. It's great to be alive. After cheering one after another, some people gradually choked up and tears began to fall from their eyes. Luo Yan naturally heard the cheers of the crowd outside. Although he was blocked by the dilapidated buildings, he could still hear people's joy from the excited voices, and a smile was unconsciously drawn at the corner of his mouth. Soon, he turned his gaze to Sauron. It looks like you need a doctor. Coincidentally, I have a ship doctor. Before Sauron could answer, Luffy shouted loudly, do you have a ship doctor? That's great. I also need to find a skilled ship doctor. Luo Yanchao nodded and said, yes, you will definitely find it. After confirming the news of Allocation's death, the villagers flocked to Allocation amusement park. After witnessing Allocation's tragic death with their own eyes, their emotions that had not yet fully calmed down became excited again. Luo Yan's gaze swept over the villagers present, and he saw Nami, who was also very excited in the crowd. However, his gaze did not stop, just swept by like that. In the evening, as Luo Yan, who gave Allocation a fatal attack, was warmly welcomed by the villagers. Although it was not a banquet, he managed enough wine and meat. Luo Yan and Sarong sat opposite each other at an outdoor table, with large chunks of meat on the table and many wine barrels neatly arranged next to the table. Ha ha ha. Come on, let's go. Luo Yan's cheeks turned red while drinking, and his tongue was a bit awkward. Similarly, after being treated by Chitauri, Sarong's injury had completely healed, and the bandage wrapped around his chest had been completely removed. It was because of this that Sarong was able to drink without any hesitation. I didn't expect you to be so interesting, this guy. Sauron collided his wine glass with Luo Yan's and drank a large glass of wine with his head up. Both of them are wine lovers, and once they have a common language in wine, the distance between them quickly narrows. Luffy, on the other hand, was more interested in Charlotte. His cheeks bulged larger than his usual head due to being stuffed with too much meat, but even so, he still held a huge piece of meat in his hand and was stretching his neck to approach Charlotte, who was eating meat in small bites. Your medical skills are so good, come and be my ship doctor. Since seeing Chitauri completely cure Sauron with a bottle of potion, Luffy has been interested in Chitauri and invited her to board the ship on the spot, but she refused very decisively. Chapter 10. Each role play. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Before Chitauri could answer, a gust of wind picked up a stone and hit Luffy's forehead. This was not enough to hurt Luffy, who was a rubber man, but the force carried by it still made Luffy's head tilt back. At the same time, Luo Yan's voice behind Luffy sounded with hidden anger. Luffy. Chitauri is my subordinate, isn't it too much for you to dig people in front of me? Ha ha ha. I'm sorry, by the way, do you still have that potion? Can you give me a few more? Maybe I can use it in the future. Luffy apologized with a smile and changed the topic. Chitauri nodded and took out 2 test tubes filled with dark green liquid from her small bag, handing them to Luffy. The efficacy will weaken after 1 month, and there will be no effect after 3 months. Ah haha, you're really a good person. Luffy stuffed the large meat in his hand into his mouth and grabbed the test tube with his oily hands. At this moment, Sanji eagerly approached Chitauri with a tray holding a cup of orange juice and carefully put down the juice. Tali sauce, this is freshly squeezed orange juice, please taste it. Thank you, the dish you made is very delicious. Chitauri whispered her thanks softly, and Sanji immediately showed an intoxicated expression, as if receiving the highest praise as a chef. It's my honor to satisfy the lady. If possible, I would like to cook for you every day. After his captain's invitation failed, Sanji finally revealed his intention to capture him with delicious food. However, Shatari refused to even consider it and said, "Sorry, I already have a captain, and if it weren't for him, I would have been sold as a slave. It was the captain who gave me magic. And taught me medicine." Shatali originally intended to say that Luo Yen gave her a magic potion, which gave her the ability to mix potions. However, she immediately realized that such a magical potion was precious and could not be spoken out, at least not by herself. Upon hearing the answer, Sanji felt as if he had been attacked. He covered his chest with one hand and staggered back 2 steps, then suddenly looked at Luo Yen with anger and unwillingness in his eyes. "Damn it. Tally Sauce is so loyal to you, I really envy it." Woo. Sanji knelt down on the ground, tears streaming down his face as he kept hitting the ground with his fists, hating himself for not being able to grasp the heart of the beautiful lady. In order to prevent his own ship doctor from being dug up, Luo Yen had already cast his gaze when throwing stones. Even though he had anticipated Shanji's performance, he couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Luffy, where are you planning to go next?" "I'm planning to go to the town of Logue, known as Start and End." "I'm not sure if it's going smoothly with you." "Ah. Starting and ending." Luffy tilted his head and looked confused. He had no idea about this place. Luo explained with a smile. "That is the place where the Pirate King was born and died, not far from here. I am planning to go there to replenish it." "The place where the Pirate King was born and died." Luffy lowered his head and silently recited, then suddenly looked up with a big smile and nodded heavily. I want to go see it. I want to go to Logue Town to see it." Let's set sail together tomorrow." Luo Yen raised his wine glass to Lu Fei across the air. Lu Fei only liked to eat meat and didn't have much interest in wine. He didn't have any wine at hand, and his eyes scanned around. He picked up the juice in front of Xia Tali, made a toast to Luo Yen across the air, and then looked up to drink the juice in one gulp. Yamaji, who was originally kneeling on the ground and suffering a heavy blow, jumped up and slapped Luffy on the back of his head, causing his neck to elongate and his head to bounce high like a pinball. Eventually, the elongated neck retracted, causing his head to return to its original position, but his swollen cheeks continued to shake uncontrollably. "Bastard. That's what I prepared specifically for Tally Sauce. Who let you drink it?" "Ahahaha. I'm sorry." Luffy didn't have the captain's airs at all. He smiled and apologized, but Yamaji had disappeared. After a while, he came to Shatali with another cup of juice that looked exactly the same as before, and put down the juice in a very gentlemanly manner. "Thank you." Shatari thanked with a smile on her face and took a small sip of the juice. The atmosphere of dinner was very cheerful from beginning to end. The next day, Luo Yen took Xia Tali back to the shore where the ship was docked, but found that both Might and Rhoda were not on the ship. Instead, they were sitting on a small raft sliding slowly around the ship, mainly Might rowing while Rhoda was fishing with a fishing rod. "What are you two doing?" Luo Yen waved at the two of them and asked. Upon hearing the sound, they both turned their heads together, and Might's hand kept moving, quickly sliding the oars to dock the raft. "Captain, have you finished your task?" Rhoda threw down the fishing rod and approached with a silly smile. Luo Yen frowned and looked at the two of them looking at the raft. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what these two goods were doing. "It's all done and everything went smoothly. You haven't answered me yet. What are you doing?" Luo Yen didn't really want to pursue anything, he was just curious about what made the two of them row rafts around their own boat. "Oh. Captain, we are summarizing the play according to your instructions. Acting. It's like rowing a raft around a boat. One of you is a sailor, and the other is a hunter. How can you play the same thing?" After listening to the explanation, Luo Yen not only did not feel relieved, but also became more confused. Perhaps he felt that Rhoda's expression was not clear enough, so Might, who followed him later, took the initiative to take over the conversation. "Captain, it's like this. Although we're on the same raft, we're not doing the same thing. I'm rowing the raft, he's fishing on it, it's different." Rhoda quickly nodded in agreement and said, "Yes, Captain, this is different. We all summarize and play according to your prompts. I am a hunter, and you said that hunters not only rely on weapons to hunt, but also need to know how to use traps and tools. So when considering fish as prey, isn't the fishing rod just a trap and tool? Don't you say, every time I catch a fish, I can feel that the magic potion has been digested a bit?" Without waiting for Luo Yen to answer, Mick quickly agreed, "Yes, I also summarized and played according to your prompts. Sailors are the people who control ships, so we should not only control the direction of the ship, but also consider how much power it provides. That's why I thought of rafting, and the effect is also quite good." Luo Yan's mouth twitched unconsciously, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. He could only cough forcefully and turn the topic aside. "Ahem. Let's leave now, let's go, set sail."